Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back in time, not to castles or battles, but to something far more personal: bedtime. Imagine the year is 1327. You're a peasant in a small English village. The harvest is done, the sheep are in their pens, and the sky is fading from dull gray to soot black. There's no Netflix, no doom scrolling, no buzzing group chat, just the creak of your cottage door and the heavy quiet of dusk settling in. You're about to fall into a kind of sleep most of us modern folk can only dream of. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough to move your thumbs, leave a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you all drift off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun has barely disappeared behind the trees, and already the air feels slower, thicker somehow. You step outside your timber-framed cottage just long enough to toss a final handful of slop to the pigs. They grunt their approval, then settle into their muddy beds. Yes, even livestock know when enough's enough. You stretch, hearing your spine crackle like firewood. Your hands are rough and cracked from the day's labor digging, hauling, threshing, feeding, and each muscle whispers, "We're done now." There's a kind of peace to this tiredness, the kind that comes when your body knows exactly what it was built to do. It's not exhaustion from spreadsheets or traffic. It's the bone-deep satisfaction of a day well used. You duck back into the cottage. The interior is dim, lit only by the amber flicker of a tallow candle. Its flame trembles in a draft you've long since stopped noticing. In one corner, your youngest child is curled on a straw mattress, already nodding off. In another, your spouse quietly stirs a pot of lentils that will be dinner and breakfast, and maybe lunch too. The hearth crackles, radiating a dry, smoky warmth that seems to slow time itself. There is no electric light, no glowing rectangles, no buzzing appliances. You're not winding down from stimulation. You're being carried gently into stillness. The human circadian rhythm evolved with the sun, and here, in this little medieval village, that rhythm still rules. When it gets dark, you sleep. When it gets light, you rise. Simple. It's not romantic. Exactly. Your back hurts. The stew smells a little burned, and there's something squirming in the rushes on the floor. But it is honest. There's no pretending you're not tired. No caffeine-fueled denial. Just surrender. Outside, the village is settling too. Chickens have fluffed themselves into balls of feathers. Dogs are quiet, maybe curled beside a doorstep, or, if they're lucky, inside. Somewhere in the distance, the church bell rings the compline hour, the final prayer before sleep. It's not a command, but a cue, a soft signal that the day has closed. You toss a log onto the fire and sit for a moment on a wooden stool. The heat hits your knees first, then your chest. Your eyes begin to blur. You scratch your beard or your chin, if you're the less hirsute sort, and glance at the ceiling beams, thick with cobwebs. The flicker of firelight dances there, hypnotic. You don't check your phone. You don't even check a clock. There is no clock. Time doesn't tick, it breathes. And so, eventually, you rise. You move toward the sleeping mat in the corner, shared with your spouse and maybe a toddler who insists on kicking you in the ribs. You lie down. The bedding is coarse, stuffed with straw or hay. Maybe some old rags, but it does the job. The weight of woolen blankets presses comfortingly on your limbs. You hear the fire sigh. You hear your own breathing. And then, without ceremony or struggle, you slip beneath the surface. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants actually got more sleep than we do today. Some argue that their days were so physically demanding that sleep was deeper and more restorative by necessity. Others suggest that poor nutrition, parasites, and cold drafts may have kept folks tossing and turning more than we like to imagine. But whatever the truth, one thing is certain: they didn't lie in bed worrying about inboxes, body mass indexes, or existential dread at 3:17 a.m. They were simply tired. And so, on this imaginary night in 14th century England, you too are allowed to be tired. Not in the frantic, caffeine-chasing way we wear exhaustion like a badge of productivity, but in the gentler, earned way. Your eyes close because they want to. Your body sinks because it can. You've given everything today, and now it gives something back. As the candle guttered and the room darkened completely, you didn't even notice the moment you drifted off. When you wake, It's not because of an alarm, a meeting ping, or your upstairs neighbor vacuuming at dawn. It's because your body says, we've rested enough. But not yet, because we're still back in time, in the sturdy wooden bones of a medieval peasant cottage. And right now, we're just slipping into sleep, not coming out of it. Let's pause a moment and zoom out, gently. What gave medieval people such deeply restorative sleep? It wasn't just the absence of phones or TikTok, it was the way their entire day set the stage. And the biggest player in that game, physical labor. You, dear listener, just spent the day doing the kind of movement that would make a modern fitness tracker explode with pride. From dawn until dusk, you were bent, lifting, hauling, stirring, walking, weeding, chopping, stacking, herding, mending. Your calves got a full workout from trudging up and down uneven hills. Your forearms are still humming from side swings. Your shoulders have something to say about lifting that bucket from the well for the 5th time today. You didn't do cardio or fit in some strength training. You lived it. Movement was so embedded in your routine that you didn't think about it. You certainly didn't pay a monthly fee to do it next to sweaty strangers under fluorescent lights. It was just life. There's an old phrase, the best sleep aid is a good day's work. Medieval peasants had this built into their very survival. They had to move to eat, to stay warm, to make it to next spring. And that movement wasn't frantic or panicked. It was rhythmic, seasonal, and usually outdoors, far more in tune with nature than the treadmill in your climate-controlled gym. Modern science has finally circled back around to what our ancestors already lived. Regular, moderate physical activity during the day promotes faster sleep onset, deeper slow-wave sleep, and fewer nighttime awakenings. In other words, if you want to sleep like a peasant, move like one. And yes, there were days when medieval labor was brutal. Plowing frozen earth or hauling thatch in the rain is no one's idea of fun. But even the hard days followed a natural arc. There were seasons of intensity like harvest and seasons of rest, like midwinter. Unlike today's 24/7 culture, work and rest in the medieval world followed rhythms older than anyone could remember. Historians still argue whether peasants had more free time than modern workers. Some sources suggest that they worked fewer hours overall, especially outside of peak seasons. Others point to relentless obligations to lords, taxes, and church. But most agree on this: their exhaustion was physical, not mental. And that makes a difference. You don't lie in bed at night, overthinking a passive-aggressive email from your boss or spiraling about climate change. You're not scrolling, comparing your dinner to someone's Instagram perfect sourdough. You're not reliving that weird thing you said during a Zoom call last week. You're just heavy, sore, and ready to melt into your mattress of straw and hand-woven wool. Let's say your day included gathering herbs, tending to geese, or ferrying firewood. None of those sound thrilling, but all of them required your body, your breath, and your awareness. And they came with natural sensory perks: birdsong, wood smoke, the feel of sun on your face. You may not have had running water, but you had a kind of groundedness most of us would pay money for today. You earned your rest not just with effort, but with presence. As you stretch out your limbs beneath your scratchy woolen blanket, you feel it, not pain, but use. The kind of fatigue that makes your eyelids heavy, not your mind. The kind that resets you. There is no overthinking, no should I check my candle budget, stress. Your brain knows your body is safe, spent, and in need of repair. So it obliges. The hearth crackles one last time before the fire fades. Outside, a night owl hoots once and then goes silent. In the distance, someone coughs, a baby stirs, and then all is still, and you sink. Now that your limbs are settling and your breath has slowed, let's talk about one of the most powerful sleep aids our medieval peasant friends enjoyed without knowing it. Of course, the blessed absence of artificial light. You know that buzzing fluorescent glow in your kitchen, that cold bluish haze from your phone screen, that ceiling light you forgot to dim even though it's 10 p.m. and your brain thinks it's still 3 in the afternoon. Yeah, none of that existed here. In your little timber frame cottage, light means firelight. It's orange. It flickers. It dances on the walls like shadows trying to tell you bedtime stories. Maybe a candle sits in a carved-out turnip on the table. Maybe you've splurged very rarely on a bit of lamp oil for a clay lamp. But most nights, your screen time is watching embers glow and fade in the hearth. This dim environment is a quiet but powerful sleep cue. Without screens or bulbs to blast photons into your eyeballs, your brain naturally releases melatonin, your internal signal that it's time to rest. Today, we fight our own wiring. In the Middle Ages, your wiring simply worked. And the darkness, it wasn't just a backdrop, it was an event. When night fell, it fell. There was no resisting it. No staying up to finish one more episode or answer one more Slack message. Once the sun dipped behind the hills and the last light bled from the sky, the village quieted in layers. First, the children quieted, tumbling into slumber like a basket of laundry. Then, the animals, hens clucking softly into silence, cows settling in their stalls, pigs wheezing in a hay pile. And finally, the grown-ups, whose days had wrung them dry and whose beds, no matter how humble, now looked irresistible. Historians still debate the exact effects of this nightly darkness on medieval health. Some suggest sleep patterns were more fragmented, given that peasants might wake for chores, prayers, or checking on livestock. Others point to an interrupted deep sleep as a natural benefit of such full-body fatigue and complete visual shutdown. Either way, the nightly dimming of the world signaled one thing: surrender. And here's a twist that might make you chuckle. Medieval folks didn't hate the dark, they respected it. It was sacred in a way. Night was the time of God, of angels and dreams. You wouldn't dare fill it with idle distraction or glow-in-the-dark TikToks about mushroom coffee. Instead, you might mumble a quiet prayer, then lie back and let the blackness close in around you like a woolen shawl. No fear, just space, just rest. Your cottage has no glowing numbers on a digital alarm clock, no charging cables blinking red. The closest thing to light pollution is the faint halo from the moon filtering through a sheep's bladder window pane. And it's not just visual darkness that helps you, it's mental darkness too. Nothing is demanding your attention. Nothing is popping up. Nothing beeps, pings, dings, or buzzes. You are not needed anywhere except exactly where you are. There's a gentleness to the dark here. You're not afraid of it. You're part of it. You move slower in it. Your voice gets softer. You feel small, but in the comforting way, like being one quiet star in a huge night sky. And if you do wake up in the night, you don't panic. You don't start mentally building your grocery list or reliving a conversation from 3 years ago. You don't grab a phone and blast your retinas with weather updates. No, you lie still. Maybe you whisper a prayer. Maybe you rearrange the wool blanket around your shoulders and drift again. So tonight, as we leave the modern glow behind and step deeper into this medieval hush, let's try something radical. Trust the dark. Let it come in. Let it close gently over your eyes. Let it carry you into the kind of sleep we've forgotten how to have. Not because it's gone, but because we've made too much light to see it. And now, with the candle long extinguished, and your eyes heavy from firelight and field work and good stillness, let yourself go. There's nothing left to do. The day is finished. The dark is here, and it wants you quiet. Let's stay here a moment longer, deep in the quiet of a world without clocks. Because in medieval times, bedtime wasn't a personal decision, it was communal. You didn't just feel that it was time to sleep. You heard it. Across the village, at the edge of the trees, stands the church. Stone walls, a modest bell tower. Maybe moss creeps up its sides, and ivy curls through the cracked lead windows. And hanging in that tower, sometimes visible, sometimes not, is the bell that governs time. And tonight, as always, it rings out the hour of Compline. You're already drowsy from your stew and the fading fire, but this soft, low toll seals the deal. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, just a handful of mellow notes that float over fields and rooftops, telling every villager, it's time to let go. And you listen, not because you're forced, but because you're part of the rhythm. The medieval day was built around a set of canonical, our church-sanctioned moments for prayer, marked by bells, matins before dawn, lauds at sunrise, prime terce, sext, none, vespers, and finally, Compline, just before sleep. Even if you weren't especially devout, the bells shaped your day like invisible scaffolding. They told you when to start, when to pause, and most crucially when to stop. And that stopping point, it wasn't midnight. It wasn't after 5 more to DOS. It was whenever darkness settled and the bell said, enough. Historians still debate just how strictly peasants followed these hours. Some argue it was mostly monks and churchmen who lived by the bell. Others point to village records, showing how even farmers and artisans align their routines with the auditory cues from the church. But either way, the bell mattered. It marked the world's pause. There's something deeply sleep-friendly about that, having the outside world agree with your inner fatigue. You're not fighting your tiredness, while the rest of the town parties or emails or doom scrolls. You're not the only one going to bed early. You're one of many, all settling in at once, like embers falling in a hearth. And curfews helped too. Many medieval towns had official night watch curfews, often enforced by church or local lord. Once the bell rang, you were expected to be home, indoors, lights out. Not just for safety because, yes, torches and tipsy villagers don't mix well, but because sleep was seen as necessary order. And so, as the bell's final echo rolls over the rooftops, you feel something unclench inside. You've done all you can today. The animals are fed. The hearth is dying down. The children are wrapped in rags and dreams. And outside, the world is gently closing its eyes with you. There's no need to decide when to go to bed. That decision's already been made by the fading sun, the cooled soil, and the slow toll of bronze in the tower. You blow out the last candle. You wrap yourself tighter in wool. And you don't check the time because it's not yours to track. It belongs to the bell. Now that we've tucked in beneath the weight of medieval darkness and the hush of the church bell, let's talk about something that might surprise you. Medieval peasants didn't always sleep in one long stretch. That solid 8 hours straight expectation we chase today. Not exactly the default. Welcome to the world of segmented sleeper rhythm, older than alarm clocks, and arguably more natural. In your peasant cottage, after your evening prayer and a belly full of turnip stew, you drift off for what was known as first sleep. It begins not long after sunset. As the world grows truly quiet, you slip under your rough woolen blanket and surrender to gravity. For 3, maybe 4 hours, your body dives into deep rest, slow breathing, slow heartbeats, dreamless depths. Then, sometime past midnight, you wake. Not in a panicked what's wrong way. Not in a cold sweat, gasping for water and Googling symptoms. Just awake. Calmly. Naturally. This was perfectly normal. Historians have uncovered references to this sleep cycle throughout medieval texts, where first sleep and second sleep were common phrases. People expected this interval. It wasn't insomnia, it was intermission. So what did people do between sleeps? You might quietly stoke the fire, check on a snoring child, or even step outside to relieve yourself by moonlight, the frosty grass cold beneath your feet. Some used this interval to pray or reflect. Others whispered with a spouse under the covers or shared stories. There's even evidence that, for couples, this interlude was considered a spiritually blessed time for intimacy. Romantic, in a drafty cottage sort of way. And after an hour or two, your eyelids begin to sag again. The fire has faded. The world is quiet once more. And so begins second sleep, lighter, dreamier, and sometimes more vivid in memory. You drift again, not into a panic spiral, but into the softened landscapes of dreams, until the first rooster crows or a ray of sun sneaks through the thatch. Modern researchers are fascinated by this pattern. Some suggest it may be closer to how our bodies were designed to rest, to distinct periods of sleep, separated by a gentle wakeful pause. Others point to changes in artificial light and industrial work schedules as the main reason. We shifted to our current single block of sleep, but the consensus is clear. Waking up in the middle of the night isn't unnatural, it's historical. There's something soothing in that, isn't there? The next time you find yourself wide awake at 2 a.m., maybe you don't need to stress. Maybe you just need a candle, a little firelight, and the gentle reminder that this has happened for centuries. You're not broken. You're medieval. So now, back in our imagined cottage, that midpoint moment arrives. The fire glows low. Your body stirs. You shift. Maybe you sip something warm. Maybe you whisper to your partner. Maybe you just lie there, blinking into the dark. And then, just as naturally as you woke, you begin to drift again. Second sleep beckons. You slip beneath its surface like a boat easing back onto a quiet river. The night is not something to be survived. It's something to travel through gently, into parts. Like turning the page in a book only your body knows how to read. By now, you're nestled into the idea that medieval sleep wasn't just different, it was, in some ways, better tuned to the body's natural needs. But what about bedtime routines? What did our peasant predecessors do to ease themselves into sleep, other than collapsing from honest exhaustion? Let's wander into the smoky, straw-strewn kitchen once more and explore some of the odd yet oddly effective bedtime brews and rituals that soothed medieval folks into slumber. Start with the smell earthy, herbal, faintly sour. In the corner of the room, simmering over a bed of coals, is a clay pot filled with a gentle concoction, warm ale infused with valerian root. Maybe a sprig of hops. It's bitter, floral, and just slightly funky, but your grandmother swears by it. You sip slowly from a wooden cup, letting the warmth creep through your chest and your eyelids begin to droop. Valerian was well known in medieval herbal texts used to treat everything from headaches to melancholy, but especially to calm the nerves. Hops, too, not just for brewing beer, but for making hop pillows that supposedly brought better dreams. These were small cloth sacks filled with dried hop flowers, sometimes combined with lavender or rose petals, placed under or beside your head. You, of course, don't have a downy scented pillow. You have a sack of straw that's probably shared with fleas, but with a hop sachet tucked nearby. Your bed smells less like barn dust and more like an apothecary garden. And if herbs weren't your thing, there were more curious bedtime nightcaps. Warm goat's milk with nutmeg, thick stews loaded with leeks and garlic believed to balance humors. There's even a record of one 13th century remedy for sleeplessness. Smear badger fat on your feet and wrap them in cabbage leaves. Sleep science? Not exactly, but it's hard to argue with someone snoozing like a rock with vegetable-wrapped toes. Historians still argue whether these brews and tonics actually worked, or whether they functioned more as ritual comforts, a placebo wrapped in warmth. But either way, they signaled the body to slow down. You drank something warm. You lit something soft. You listened to the fire mumble to itself while the shadows grew longer. And if you were lucky, or perhaps unlucky, you might get a visit from a village wise woman, someone who knew her herbs and her superstitions. She'd hand you a little bundle of dried thyme and whisper something about warding off night hags. You'd nod politely and stuff it in the thatch above your bed, just in case. In some regions, you might recite a protective charm before sleep. Nothing dramatic, just a few whispered words against evil spirits or bad dreams. Sleep wasn't just about the body. It was a spiritual act, one that opened a door to another world. So you finish your warm drink. You rub your sore calves. Maybe your spouse murmurs something about their dreams from the night before, a goat that flew, a dead uncle giving advice. You both chuckle softly and let the firelight fade. The cup is empty. The candle is low. The blanket is heavy. You lie down, and you wait for sleep, for dreams, for the long quiet hours between now and morning. And as your body slackens and your thoughts begin to blur, you wonder maybe that hop pillow really does help. Let's take a moment to get truly cozy. You're drifting now, deeply, but before you slip into full sleep, let's do a little medieval bedtime inventory, because what you're sleeping on and under would surprise you more than you think. No memory foam, no Egyptian cotton, no thread count whatsoever. Welcome to the world of straw-stuffed mattresses, woolen blankets, and the unmistakable scent of rural freshness. Your bed is a simple wooden frame, maybe with ropes or wooden slats beneath. On top of that sits your pallet, which isn't a plush mattress but more of a lumpy sack. It's filled with straw, or hay, or sometimes reeds, whatever you could scrounge that season. If you're lucky, you changed the stuffing this month. If you're really lucky, the straw isn't full of bugs. And yet, as odd as it sounds, it works. You lie down, and the straw gives just enough. It shifts beneath your weight like an earthy cradle, creaking softly, smelling faintly of harvest and soil. Over you, a blanket or two, made of heavy wool, woven thick, scratching in places. It smells of lanolin and long winters and the sheep it came from. These blankets are treasured, mended again and again, maybe passed down. In some parts of Europe, they'd even stitch herbs into the corners to ward off illness or fleas. There's no pillow in the modern sense. Maybe a folded cloth or a bundle of rags. Some folks rested their heads on a piece of wood, smooth, curved, and cold. Your neck wouldn't love it, but your spine might thank you. It's simple, it's supportive, and there's no feather fluff trying to impersonate clouds. Historians still argue whether medieval people prioritized comfort in bedding the way we do. Some claim beds were symbols of status, especially in wealthier homes. Others point out that even the poorest peasants put care into preparing a clean, dry place to sleep. What's certain is that everyone, from lord to laborer, understood the value of warmth. And don't forget the textiles. Underneath you, atop the straw sack, is likely a coarse linen sheet washed as often as humanly possible, which is to say, maybe twice a season. Laundry was hard, remember, but even that worn linen adds a layer of softness between your skin and the crinkly straw. Or on the bed, maybe curtains, if you're rich or cold. Even in a cottage, people sometimes hung simple cloth sheets or furs from a rod to block drafts and retain heat. The enclosed space made sleep feel safer, more intimate, and it trapped in your body heat which you'll need. Because medieval homes were cold, and as you lie there in this nest of straw and wool, you feel something modern life rarely delivers: enoughness. There's no chasing after perfect lumbar support or sleep tracking apps. You're not wondering whether your mattress should be firmer or more breathable. You're tired, your bed is ready, and that's that. It's not perfect. Sometimes mice rustle beneath you. Sometimes the blanket smells a little goat-like, but you're warm, you're horizontal, and the day is done. Maybe your child is curled beside you, maybe a sibling, or even a neighbor if it's a festival night and space is tight. Beds were shared. Sleep was communal. Privacy. Not really a concept yet, but in that closeness was comfort, the shared warmth of bodies, the assurance that you were not alone in the dark. Your toes touch straw through a hole in the sheet, your breath makes little clouds in the air, and still, sleep pulls you down, not despite these imperfections, but perhaps because of them. You are wrapped in simplicity, supported by straw, protected by wool, and surrounded by the quiet, breathing peace of a world long gone. You're still nestled there, half asleep in your scratchy but sincere medieval bed, when you notice something else: the silence. Not the eerie, sterile silence of a soundproof room, but a warm, textured hush, the kind that wraps around you like a blanket of stillness, stitched together with soft creaks and natural rhythms. This, friend, is what we might call the Great Silence. Your medieval cottage at night is alive, but in a gentle way. You hear the crackle of the last ember in the hearth. Maybe the quiet wheeze of your spouse's breath, a sigh from a sleeping child, or the occasional soft rustle of straw shifting beneath someone's elbow. Step outside just for a moment and the world is darker and quieter still. No hum of refrigerators, no passing cars, no shriek of ambulances in the distance. Instead, the distant hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind in trees. If it's winter, snow muffles everything like thick velvet. If it's summer, insects buzz lazily in the grass before drifting off themselves. Your noise pollution consists of, at most, the occasional clanging bucket, a dog barking at a fox, or a snoring neighbor behind a thin wall. And all of this the absence of mechanical roar. The gentleness of natural sound is designed for sleep, even if no one planned it that way. Historians still debate how much this auditory peace contributed to restfulness in the medieval world. Some argue that the lack of disruptive noise made sleep deeper, while others point out that shared homes with animals and humans alike could be anything but quiet. But compared to today's sonic chaos, even a snoring goat seems like a lullaby. And speaking of goats, yes, many families did sleep with animals nearby, not out of fondness necessarily, but out of necessity. Heat was precious. The body warmth of a pig or a sheep could take the edge off a freezing night. Chickens roosted in corners. Dogs lay curled by the door. Cows might be stabled beneath or beside your home, their low breathing a kind of bovine white noise. By now, you've almost forgotten what a mattress commercial sounds like. You've acclimated to the straw, the wool, the faint clucking in the corner. But tonight, we're going to zoom in on something small, strange, and surprisingly important: the lack of pillows, or at least, the pillows as we know them today. Modern sleep is full of debates about neck angles and memory foam, and whether your pillow is too firm, too soft, or just hasn't been blessed by a Scandinavian sleep specialist. But in the medieval world, pillows were optional. For peasants, the idea of a fluffy, feather-stuffed headrest was pure luxury. You might have a lumpy bundle of old linen rags, or a bag stuffed with hay, not too different from your mattress. Maybe even a block of wood, yes, really curved just enough to keep your head off the cold ground. It's not exactly a Tempur-Pedic, but it has a charm all its own. What mattered more than cushioning was position. Many peasants slept on their sides, slightly curled, with their head cradled by their arm or shoulder. Others lay on their backs, flat as planks. No adjustable incline, no ergonomic zone support, just your body adjusting to the bed, and the bed, such as it is, adjusting right back. And you might be wondering, wasn't that uncomfortable? Maybe by today's standards. But here's the thing: when your body is worked from sunrise to sunset, and you're not wired by caffeine or bathed in blue light, your sleep drive is so strong that comfort becomes relative. That bundle of hay under your ear feels like heaven after a day spent lifting barrels or walking 10 miles behind a plow. Historians still argue how widespread pillows were among non-noble classes. We know that the wealthy had embroidered, goose-feathered pillows, often scented with herbs or stitched with religious symbols. But for common folk, the goal wasn't luxury, it was function. You needed just enough elevation to breathe clearly and stay warm. Everything else was a bonus. Interestingly, some traditional societies around the world still use wooden headrests, not for softness, but for posture. Some even claim that sleeping too soft is bad for spinal alignment and respiratory flow. Maybe medieval peasants were onto something. Maybe your chiropractor would even approve. And here's another twist: for many, sleep wasn't completely horizontal. Especially during cold seasons, folks might sleep propped at a slight incline, huddled together under shared blankets. Sitting upright helped with snoring, digestion, and keeping your nose above the damp floor air. And if you were sick, the pillow was a folded coat or even a bundle of dried herbs, positioned to open the chest and ease the lungs. Speaking of herbs, lavender, thyme, mint, and rue were sometimes woven into pillowcases or placed nearby to ward off bad dreams or night spirits. Your pillow might not have perfect stitching, but it smelled like a meadow, and in that scent came calm. And if all else failed, you didn't lie awake scrolling pillow reviews. You simply closed your eyes, scratched the flea bite on your ankle, and drifted off. You didn't have a sleep setup. You had a sleep mindset. If it's dark, if it's quiet, and if it's not actively biting you, it's good enough. So tonight, as you lie in your modern bed, whether plush or plain, think about this. You don't need the perfect pillow. You just need the permission to rest, to let your head be heavy, to let your body say, yes, this will do. Whether your head rests on goose down or old linen, on lavender-scented bundles or your own folded arm, the result is the same: a slow descent, a deep breath, and sleep waiting just beneath. Let's take a deep breath. You're lying there on your straw-filled pallet, wrapped in wool, your head resting on whatever happens to be least lumpy. Just as you're about to slip under, something shifts beside you. Then something grunts. Don't be alarmed. You're not being robbed. You're not under attack. You've just rolled into one of your roommates a chicken. Welcome to the charming, chaotic, and surprisingly cozy reality of sleeping with animals. Literally. You see, for medieval peasants, the bedroom wasn't a separate, sacred, undisturbed sanctuary. It was multi-use. And during the night, that meant shared with family, with neighbors, and often with livestock. The logic was simple. Animals produce warmth, and warmth was life. Your stone cottage has cracks in the walls wide enough to let in a December wind. There's no insulation, no thermostat. So if you want to avoid waking up with frostbitten toes, you keep warm any way you can. Enter the chicken, the goat, the family dog. In some homes, even the family pig. Some animals, like chickens or ducks, roosted in corners of the home, fluttering up to wooden beams or nesting in straw-lined crates. Others, like the beloved family cow, slept in an attached stable or even directly beneath the sleeping quarters in homes with lofted second floors. The rising body heat of these animals would warm the room, and their familiar sounds became part of the nightly atmosphere. You might be chuckling, but this was practical design. That goat nudging your leg at 3 a.m. wasn't an intruder, it was central heating. Historians still debate how widespread animal co-sleeping was. In colder regions, it was common, particularly during winter. In more temperate zones, people might pen animals outside or in separate lean-tos. But for most rural peasants, especially in Northern Europe, shared sleeping quarters were simply how you survived. And let's not pretend it was idyllic. Animals snore. They smell. They don't always respect personal space. There's the occasional midnight peck on the foot or a disconcerting rustle under the bed. But over time, you adapt. Their presence becomes comforting, like a warm, breathing security blanket. And it wasn't just animals. You likely shared your sleeping space with multiple humans too. Parents, siblings, and even visiting relatives, all crammed into the same room, sometimes the same bed. Children slept sideways across their parents' feet. Grandma had the warmest corner. Uncle George snored like a war horn. There were no sleep podcasts, no white noise machines. But somehow, the overlapping snores and the rhythmic chew of a goat grinding its cud in the corner created a soundscape of their own, a kind of organic ASMR. Modern studies on sleep quality show we're increasingly isolated at bedtime, each person in their own bed, in their own room, behind their own door. But this wasn't always the norm. Humans evolved to sleep in groups. It provided warmth, safety, and a subtle but deep sense of belonging. Sure, you didn't get to stretch out like a starfish or customize your mattress firmness, but you didn't feel alone either. You weren't checking the door lock 12 times because someone or something was always nearby. There's even a kind of bedtime socializing that took place in this environment. Families often chatted, whispered stories, or said prayers together before nodding off. Children listened as parents recounted the day. Husbands and wives shared thoughts in the dark. It was messy, intimate, real. Compare that to the blue-glow silence of modern bedrooms, where couples may lie side by side but scroll separately through entire timelines of the internet, where silence can feel more like distance. So as you roll over in your peasant bed and bump against a snoring sheepdog, you don't get annoyed. You just shift a little. You reach for the warmth. You accept the company. You're not alone in the dark. You're part of a pack. And that, more than any pillow or mattress or weighted blanket, might be what makes this sleep so deep, so whole. You are surrounded by soft breathing, familiar smells, and the subtle assurance that someone, human or animal, is there. Now, let's get real for a second. You fed the pigs, fixed the roof, walked 5 miles to borrow a rake, and dodged a very suspicious goose on the way back. You're physically wrecked, but not in a bad way. Your straw bed feels like a cloud, a crunchy, sneezy cloud, and you're surrounded by the soft snorts and breathing of creatures you live with and love. Sleep comes easy, but what about stress? Modern life is drowning in it. Emails, deadlines, bills, existential dread at 3:12 a.m. So you might be wondering, did medieval peasants even feel stress like we do? And the short answer is yes, but it was different. Let's examine medieval stress, and how even when it existed, it didn't wreck their sleep the way modern stress does. Your medieval peasant had a lot on their plate, metaphorically and literally. Crops might fail. A new tax might roll in from your feudal lord. One of your sheep might wander off and get itself eaten by something toothy in the woods. And yet when the sun went down, you lay down. Why? Because most stressors were grounded in the present. You were worried about the next harvest, yes, but not about your life purpose. You feared illness or hunger, but not FOMO or Instagram algorithms. Your anxiety was real and physical, and usually solvable, at least over time, with work, prayer, or communal support. There was also less mental clutter. Your brain wasn't juggling 20 tabs. You weren't doom scrolling before bed. You didn't have to remember your friend's new dietary preferences and the password to 6 different streaming platforms. You weren't overwhelmed by information. Historians still debate whether this meant people were emotionally healthier or simply numbed by hardship, but they agree that medieval minds, while anxious, weren't overstimulated. That's key. And then there's the spiritual buffer. Your peasant self might not understand the full science of sleep, but you likely believed in some cosmic order. Maybe it was God, maybe the cycles of nature, maybe just the fact that night followed day, without fail. There was trust even in hard times that rest was part of the pattern, that you were allowed to stop. Compare that to today. You go to bed tired, but your mind says, wait, did I do enough? Did I post that thing? What will tomorrow demand? Sleep becomes something you have to achieve, rather than something you receive. Peasants didn't meditate. They didn't have mindfulness apps, but their lives were mindful, in their way. When you're weeding by hand for 3 hours, you're not multitasking. When you're stirring stew, you're not checking the news. When you rest, you really rest. And when things got hard, you had community, not just family, but a whole village full of people in the same situation. You'd talk around the fire. You'd vent while gathering water. You'd laugh at things that weren't funny just to survive the week. And then you'd sleep not because the problems were gone, but because your body knew when to rest and your mind wasn't trying to outthink the universe. That's a lesson we might all need now. You don't have to be unbothered to sleep well. You just need to know that sleep is still possible, even with problems unsolved. So tonight, in your imaginary peasant bed, surrounded by quiet animals and snoring siblings, your mind slows. Your worries are real, but they're not infinite. You've done what you could. Tomorrow will come. And now is for nothing but breath, and blankets, and the soft whistle of wind outside your shutters. You let go not because everything is perfect, but because you're allowed to. Let's imagine it's early autumn now. The harvest is finished. The days are getting shorter. The wind has started whispering secrets through the cracks in your cottage walls. The heavy work is mostly done, and as the sun dips lower each evening, you begin to notice something. You're sleeping more. Welcome to one of the coziest, most underrated perks of medieval life: seasonal sleep, long naps in haylofts, slower winter rhythms, and the ancient art of resting with the land. Your medieval self doesn't have a productivity app or a quarterly goal to hit. You live by the seasons. And nature, my friend, is telling you to slow down. In the warmer months, you rise early and work long. The sun dictates everything. But in the colder ones, especially during the lull between harvest and planting, you take more breaks. You sleep longer at night. And yes, you nap. That's right, napping was totally acceptable in the medieval peasant's world. If you were lucky enough to finish your chores early or the weather turned suddenly foul, you might duck into the hayloft and curl up in a pile of sweet-smelling straw for a midday snooze. It's warm, soft, and slightly itchy, but in a strangely pleasant way. You're not lazy. You're listening to your body, to the rhythm of the year. Farmers knew that winter was a time for restoration. The earth was resting, and so could you. Historians have documented evidence of bimodal and seasonal sleep cycles. In many rural areas, particularly in colder regions, peasants slept 9 to 10 hours during winter months, without artificial light extending the day. And with much of the agricultural work paused, there was less to do and more time to simply do nothing. This included afternoon rest. And unlike today, where naps are often squeezed in guiltily or hidden behind closed blinds, medieval naps were matter of fact. If your body needed rest and your chores were done, you found a quiet corner and disappeared into it for a while. You might nap by the hearth, on a bench, in the barn, while the cows chooka beside you, or outside under a tree, if the weather's kind. The sound of wind through barley stalks, or a lull in the rain against the thatch roof, might carry you off without effort. And it's not just solo naps either. Entire families might huddle together for warmth and rest during long winter evenings. You'd drift off early, wake up in the night, remember your first and second sleep, share a few whispered words, then doze again. Hours and hours of sleep, without shame. In a way, this was a kind of natural hibernation. You conserved energy. You weren't pushing against your limits every day. You respected the limits. You slept more when the sun gave less. Today, we tend to fight the seasons. We install bright lights, blast productivity playlists, and scold ourselves for slowing down in winter. But our medieval ancestors didn't need permission to rest more in the cold months. The world gave it to them. There's something beautifully human in that. So tonight, as you lie in bed imagining hayloft naps and snow-covered roofs, think about this: sleep isn't just about night. It's about time, seasons, permission, flow. If the animals rest when the fields are quiet, if the earth turns inward under frost, maybe you can too. Let go of the guilt, let go of the pace. And if your modern mind says, but I didn't do enough today, remember that medieval peasants had days where they simply mended socks, stirred soup, and napped by the fire, and no one took their humanity away for it. So now close your eyes and imagine the scent of hay, the softness of your own breath, the quiet of a cold world at peace. You've earned your nap. You're resting now, not just alone in your medieval dreams, but surrounded by warmth, human warmth. And that's no accident. Let's explore one of the most human and heartening aspects of medieval sleep, the social side. Because back then, sleep was a shared experience both physically and emotionally. Imagine it. You, your spouse, your 3 children, and maybe even an elderly relative are all nestled on the same bed platform, layered in scratchy woolen blankets and mutual exhaustion. There's no king-sized mattress, no private bedroom with a lock. You sleep together because it's warm, practical, and honestly kind of nice. There's comfort in company. Today, we often associate a good night's sleep with solitude and silence. But for medieval peasants, togetherness was security. It meant fewer night terrors when you heard a strange sound outside. It meant shared warmth. And for children, it meant growing up cocooned by the steady breath and heartbeat of the people who loved you. You'd fall asleep listening to familiar voices murmuring in the dark. Your parents whispering about a sick cow. Your older sister recalling a story she'd overheard in the village square. These weren't formal bedtime tales, just fragments of life, drifting through the night air like smoke. Sometimes those fragments became real storytelling. In a time before books were widespread, and when entertainment was hyperlocal, stories were passed down orally, often at night. When hands were idle and candles were low, a family might trade tales of saints and sinners, goblins and ghosts, or that one time the priest got chased by a goat. You know the story. You'd laugh, you'd listen, and slowly, your eyes would grow heavy. There were lullabies too, soft, wordless humming. Folk tunes passed from mother to daughter, father to son. No speaker system, no Spotify playlist, just voices, old and comforting, reminding you that someone was near. Historians still discuss how central this nightly storytelling was to community bonding. Some argue that these shared sleep spaces shaped childhood memories and emotional resilience. Others point to the way stories and songs reinforced moral lessons and cultural identity, all while lulling everyone into rest. And sleep was communal in another way, too. It was observed. If someone thrashed, muttered, or cried out, there were people nearby to soothe them. If a child had a nightmare, there was no long walk through a dark house to find comfort. That comfort was inches away. Compare that to the modern experience alone in a room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if you should wake someone or just keep spinning through your thoughts in silence. Our autonomy has brought us privacy, but it's also cost us a certain softness. In medieval homes, that softness lived in shared sleep. You were never just a body shutting down for the night. You were part of a whole. Your dreams were tucked into the same blankets as your families. Your snores harmonized with the dogs. And if you didn't sleep well, you weren't treated like a malfunctioning machine. You were brought tea. You were told a joke. Someone might say, sleep's fickle when the moon's bright. And you'd nod, soothed not by advice, but by understanding. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine that hum of quiet voices, that heat from shared breath, that strange peace of knowing you're one among many, safe in the tangle of limbs, and laughter and familiar scents. Sleep doesn't have to be a solitary mission. It can be a shared sigh, a chorus of dreams, a story told in the dark. And tonight, that story is yours. The fire is dying down now, casting sleepy shadows on the low beams above you. Your limbs are heavy, your thoughts are slow, and your whole body is floating in that delicious state between waking and dreaming. But in the medieval world, that's when things get interesting, because now it's time to talk about dreams. You see, dreams in medieval Europe weren't just the strange byproducts of cheese and exhaustion. They were serious business messages, warnings, symbols, or even divine whispers. And what you saw while you slept could change your life. Tonight, your dream might feature something simple, walking through a golden field, only it turns into water, or a talking fox, or maybe your late grandmother shows up, scolding you for using too much salt in the soup. Strange, Sure. But in your world, these are not just oddities, they're signs. In the Middle Ages, dreams were often seen as glimpses into the supernatural realm. People believed that sleep opened the soul to visitations, sometimes by saints, sometimes by spirits, and sometimes by things better left unnamed. Church authorities, of course, had opinions. Some dreams were said to come from God, others from the devil, and some were just products of an overly indulgent supper. The line between vision and delirium was blurry. Still, the sense that dreams meant something was everywhere. There were dream manuals, written by scholars and monks, to help decode the symbols. Dreamed of climbing a ladder, that meant spiritual progress. Dreamed of pigs, possibly greed, or maybe just that you sleep next to one. And let's not forget the concept of true dreams. These were seen as clear messages from the divine, or even prophetic glimpses of the future. If someone dreamed a relative would fall ill, and they did, that dream was remembered and retold for years. Historians still debate how seriously peasants took dream interpretation. It's likely that while monks and nobles might turn to books of symbols, everyday folks relied on local wisdom, superstition, and good old storytelling. A weird dream wasn't just internal, it was community news. You wake in the morning and mumble, "I dreamed of a crow pecking at the church roof," and suddenly, your cousin's convinced something bad's coming. Maybe a storm, maybe a death, maybe just a rude tax collector. Either way, it sticks. Dreams were shared, just like sleep, and people listened. There was a kind of reverence for the subconscious, a belief that sleep wasn't an escape, but a journey, a portal, a time to receive. Compare that to today, when dreams are often dismissed as random nonsense, leftovers of brain static. We rarely honor them. We forget them by breakfast. But in the medieval world, your dreams might find their way into sermons, gossip, or even legal testimony. And because sleep was segmented, remember first and second sleep, people often woke between dreams. This gave them time to reflect, to sit with the images, to even record them if they were literate. One 15th century text describes a woman who kept a dream basket, not for writing, but for symbols: a feather, a smooth stone, a scrap of blue cloth, each representing a dream remembered. So tonight, as you begin to drift toward your own dream world, imagine it the medieval way. Not random, but rich. Not meaningless, but mysterious. Maybe your dreams tonight will feature a forgotten friend, a glowing tree, a strange bird calling your name. Let them come. There's no need to interpret. Just welcome the wandering. You are not just resting. You are receiving. Let the dreams find you. The stars are fading now, pale light curling over the hills like mist. The rooster hasn't crowed yet, but he will. And as your breath deepens, you begin to feel it, the return. You're not leaping out of bed. There's no jarring alarm, no vibrating phone, no artificial dawn light blinking from a bedside gadget. You wake the way the world does, slowly. This is the final stage of your medieval sleep. You, reborn with the rooster. All around you, the signs of morning begin to stir. The fire is little more than a whispering ember. The chickens in the corner fidget, feathers ruffling against dry straw. Outside, the first birds call to each other, thin whistles at the edge of waking. The breath of your family, warm and steady all night, begins to shift. Someone mutters in sleep. Someone scratches an arm. You blink at the ceiling, a beam of pale light tracing the wooden slats above. The smell of night smoke, wool, earth gives way to something fresher. Dew on grass, cold clay, morning breath and warm fur. There's no snooze button here. There's just readiness. Your body, though still sore from yesterday's labor, understands the rhythm. It's time. And here's the thing. You're not resentful about waking up. Sleep hasn't been a battle. It hasn't been elusive, fragile, or fitful. It was deep and honest. When your body asked to rest, it rested. When the world began to rouse, you roused too. No second guessing, no mental fog. Historians still argue whether peasants really woke up refreshed. Life was hard, after all. There were aches, hunger pangs, and the ever-present weight of surviving. But in terms of sleep quality, slowness, darkness, stillness, shared warmth, they might have been doing better than we think. And when you do finally sit up slowly, under the heavy woolen blankets, you stretch. Not a forced yoga pose, just a natural unfurling. Your back pops once, satisfyingly. You scratch your head, maybe yawn, maybe laugh, because someone's snoring has turned into words. And then it's time to rise. Outside, mist clings to the fields. A dog trots by the doorway. Somewhere in the village, a bell tolls prime the first of the day's canonical hours. You rise not because you have to, but because the day is calling. You know your chores. You know the shape of the hours ahead. There will be labor, yes, but there will also be bread, light, warmth, and later a return to this bed, this moment. There's a trust in that rhythm. The world hasn't changed overnight. You're still poor, still muddy, still mortal, but also still part of the cycle. And that is comforting. You don't reach for coffee. You reach for your boots. You don't dread the day. You walk into it, shoulders rolling forward, hands already remembering what they'll touch: grain, fur tools, firewood, water, stone. And tonight, you'll return to this very spot. Maybe earlier, maybe later, depending on the season. You'll lie down next to the same people, under the same roof, with the same soft breath in the room. You'll dream again, and sleep, as it always has, will come. Now, let your breath settle. There's no more story to tell tonight. The fire has burned low. The world of the village fades behind your eyelids. Just a softened silhouette in the dark. You've walked its roads, sat at its hearth, felt the quiet weight of its night air wrap around your limbs. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders lower. Your modern world, its noises, its lights, its expectations can wait. Tonight, you've remembered something older. A rhythm beneath the noise. A way of being that doesn't rush, doesn't compete, doesn't overthink. Feel the straw beneath you, not literally, but somewhere in memory. The wool against your skin. The comforting weight of a blanket that does nothing but exist. There's no need to be perfect here. No need to sleep well. Just sleep. Let your body fall into itself, gravity doing all the work. Let your thoughts blur and soften. If a dream comes, let it. If nothing comes, that's fine too. The night is still. You are safe. And the day is done.